And for people who say you didn't vote for this, yes, you did. You knew this man had no leadership capability whatsoever when you elected him again. And this is what you get. You get his top 5 priorities as he sits here today. He had a whole diagram up with the little swimming pool in the front yard. And nothing that he does can actually improve the quality of life for most average Americans.
But something that is kind of important.
What was the top issue on his mind that caused him to
the swimming pool?
This is the idea that this is the top.
It was because he wanted to show the reporters a chart that, by the way, he had shown them before of the size of the reflecting pool compared to skyscrapers.
Yes, I'm not.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers dismantles Jason Rantz on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as they clash over Donald Trump's priorities, controversial spending proposals, and growing Republican frustration within the GOP. As Jason Rantz defends the MAGA agenda, Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers push back with facts, exposing the disconnect between Trump's focus and the everyday concerns of Americans. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers shut down Jason Rantz on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
The Republican rebellion keeps growing over some of the president's biggest priorities. Tonight, not only did GOP leaders scrap funding for his prized White House ballroom out of their immigration package, they're also threatening to kill his nearly $1.8 billion slush fund for his allies, and for good.
I think even DOJ knows that this was a bad idea, and what we need to do is provide finality. We got to either eliminate it, streamline it, guardrail it. It can't go in its current form, and if that's the only choice we should have, we should eradicate it.
Tillis says that he plans to introduce an amendment that would permanently shut down the fund by tying it to that massive immigration bill. But the president continues to fight for the fund, and he refuses to let the issue go.
Is the $1.8 billion DOJ fund dead, or is it on hold?
It's, I'd have to ask the lawyers, I don't know. The weaponization fund, as far as I'm concerned, was a beautiful thing. It was something I didn't make it, but I heard that. I thought that was the greatest thing.
So not only is he vigorously defending this weaponization fund, but I just also want to remind people that even though DOJ has said they are not moving forward with it, they refuse to actually put that in writing, which is why Republicans are pushing back and saying we might have to do something about that.
I'm so glad to see this. I'm so glad to see them tank the weaponization fund, which was so gross. I mean, the idea that a person who beat up a cop could get compensation for that just disgusts me. And I'm so glad to see them not funding the ballroom. Like, as we said before, Americans are hurting. It's not the time to be doing these kinds of projects and asking the American taxpayer to pay for it. So good on the Republicans for saying, look, this stuff is not consistent with our values right now.
Let me play, actually, on the ballroom, let me just play what Scott Bessent said about the ballroom when he was questioned today.
There is no cost to the American people. If there is a new bill for the ballroom, the decorative part of the ballroom is privately funded, and everything that you were talking about.
The president requested $1 billion for the White House ballroom in our budget. He has spent $45 million on a military birthday parade. So
look, it goes on outside my office every day. I've watched it progress, and it is national security matters that the $1 billion is for.
That's ridiculous, and I think you know it.
National security matters. Meanwhile, just to point out, they're building an outdoor stadium outside the White House that is open air, that the president is supposed to attend a UFC game at in a couple of months. Fight, excuse me.
You were about to just get roasted on that. I think that in your read, I think that it highlighted the fundamental problem and disconnect with Donald Trump and the rest of the American public at whole, and MAGA and the rest of the American public. You outlined his priorities. And right now his priorities are the little water thing in front of the Washington Monument.
Reflecting pool.
The reflecting pool or whatever. And then his other priority is a ballroom. And then his other priority is a slush fund.
Don't forget the arch.
Oh, and the arch. And then you have the UFC stadium he's building. Like, none of that drives down prices.
This exchange highlights a bigger question about priorities and whether political leaders are focused on the issues that matter most to everyday Americans. While supporters may argue that symbolic projects and loyalty-driven initiatives have their place, polling consistently shows that voters are far more concerned about inflation, healthcare costs, housing affordability, and wages. What strengthens Bakari Sellers' position is that criticism of these spending priorities isn't just coming from Democrats. Even some Republicans have expressed concern about controversial funds and projects that appear disconnected from the economic realities many families face. When members of the president's own party push back, it suggests the debate goes beyond partisan politics and becomes a question of governance. Economic anxiety remains a major issue across the country. Millions of Americans continue to live paycheck to paycheck while dealing with rising grocery prices, higher insurance premiums, and housing costs that have outpaced income growth in many communities. In that environment, proposals tied to luxury renovations or politically charged compensation programs are naturally going to receive heightened scrutiny from voters. That doesn't mean every government renovation or special initiative is automatically inappropriate. Administrations from both parties have invested in upgrades and large projects. The real issue is timing and emphasis. During periods of financial strain, people expect leaders to focus first on practical concerns that directly affect their daily lives. Ultimately, Bakari Sellers' broader point gains credibility because it reflects what many Americans consistently say they want from their elected officials: lower costs, economic relief, and attention to pressing challenges. Leadership is often judged by priorities, and voters tend to notice when those priorities appear out of step with the struggles they face at home every day.
None of that keeps Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. None of that is actually the eye on the ball of what you want the president of the United States to be doing. And for people who say you didn't vote for this, yes, you did. You knew this man had no leadership capability whatsoever when you elected him again. And this is what you get. You get his top 5 priorities as he sits here today. He had a whole diagram up with the little swimming pool in the front yard. And nothing that he does can actually improve the quality of life for most average Americans. Those are his top 5 priorities.
Yeah, but it's been an astounding level of tone deafness, week after week, event after event, boondoggle after boondoggle, as the American people are having such a hard time making ends meet. It's just, it's the convergence of the two things. The frivolity that's going on, and just the frivolity. F-R-I-V-O-I.
Don't use those big words, right?
I know, I can't use this. Come on. The let them eat cake attitude going on frivolous projects on this side, on the White House side, on the Trump side, the grift, the family enrichment. It's one thing after another, the $40 million documentary by Melania.
Jason, you're shaking your head. Why are you
while
shaking?
people can't pay for gas.
Why are you shaking your head?
Because it's an exaggerated reaction to this. This idea that this is like the biggest priority is obviously not true. Iran is his biggest priority.
He walks around with
hold on.
Okay,
wait, hold on. Let me ask you a question, though. Because he called that Oval Office impromptu press conference today, and can you tell me why he did?
Well, he talked to a bunch of reporters, which is something that is kind of important.
What was the top issue on his mind that caused him to bring
the swimming pool?
This is the idea that this is the top.
It was because he wanted to show the reporters a chart that, by the way, he had shown them before of the size of the reflecting pool compared to skyscrapers.
Yes, I'm not moved by the fact that the guy who's interested and obsessed with real estate and projects is actually talking about this. This idea, however,
you acknowledge that he's obsessed with real estate and projects.
I think that is clearly something that he's interested in. I'm not arguing that he's not interested in this. I am, however, arguing that it's not his top priority. That is the kind of exaggerated reaction that I do think ends up dismissing legitimate concerns that you raise, specifically on Iran. You can talk about something without it being your number one priority. We have to acknowledge that.
I will say, going back to legitimate concerns then, I do want to touch on something that Batya mentioned, which was the January 6th $1.8 billion slush fund, and how we know that if that does end up happening, that money could potentially go to January 6th rioters. And that is something that I have been encouraged to see Republicans actually finding their backbone and pushing back on and saying, no, we don't want to see this slush fund happen. And
it's dead.
But he says it's not.
No, he didn't. No, he did not say it's not dead.
Today,
he just literally didn't use the words.
He said,
it is dead.
He said, I love it. He talked all about January
courts.
6th and how his crowd sizes and how it was a day of love
and
and
killed by the courts.
And friendship. He said people were crying.
But that was
no, but he's going to do everything in his power to make it happen because he does want to see his.
I'm not trying to. I don't need a Ouija board to try to figure out what Trump means or what he doesn't mean. The courts didn't kill it. So the issue now for Republicans is going to be what are they going to do about it? And some of them are actually considering passing legislation that would make it permanent, that slush fund never exists.
This exchange highlights a broader concern about priorities and accountability in government. What strengthens Bakari Sellers and Abby Phillip's position is that many of the criticisms they're raising aren't coming exclusively from Democrats. A growing number of Republicans have also questioned whether controversial funds, loyalty-based appointments, and high-profile projects reflect what voters actually expected from their leaders. Poll after poll shows that Americans remain most concerned about the cost of living. Families continue to struggle with grocery prices, housing affordability, healthcare expenses, and rising insurance costs. While economic indicators may show improvement on paper, many households still feel financially squeezed. In that context, voters naturally pay attention to whether leaders are focused on lowering everyday costs or pursuing projects that appear symbolic or disconnected from those struggles. Another issue is qualifications and governance. Historically, appointments to major national security positions have been scrutinized based on experience and expertise because those roles carry enormous responsibility. Concerns about rewarding loyalty over competence aren't new and have been raised under administrations from both parties. The difference is that these decisions can directly affect public confidence in institutions responsible for intelligence and national security. Even the pushback over the proposed DOJ fund illustrates a larger point. When lawmakers from the president's own party hesitate to support an initiative, it suggests genuine unease rather than simple partisan opposition. That doesn't mean every criticism aimed at the administration is automatically fair. However, leadership is often judged by what receives attention and political capital. At a time when many Americans are worried about paying bills and planning for the future, debates over controversial spending, symbolic projects, and loyalty tests can understandably leave voters wondering whether their concerns are truly at the top of the agenda.
I also want to just point out one other thing. The Bill Pulte thing at DNI, choosing the director of national intelligence who has zero qualifications, that seems to be like the next frontier for where Republicans are going to really start to lose it on this administration in terms of the pushback.
He has one qualification, which is blind loyalty. So I know that so that's exactly what Trump wants, though, in that role. He doesn't care about national security credentials, doesn't care that the guy doesn't have any experience in intelligence, has never had a security clearance, no geopolitical connections, as far as I know. But that is the one thing that he wants. And he wants someone in that role to go after his perceived political enemies. We saw him do it with Tulsi Gabbard as well. And obviously now she is left. And so he wants to fill that vacancy with someone who will be willing to carry those things out.
The very practical political problem goes back to something that Abby said earlier, which is that you now have Cornyn. You now have Cornyn. You now have Cassidy. You now have Tillis. You have these individuals who kind of have this unbridled sense of...
Well, you do have Thune, too, because he's not a fan of Bill Pulte.
Well, I mean, actually, that's what I was thinking
Congress,
about.
But he's also not a fan.
I have a feeling that Bill Pulte is going to have a rough ride to getting that DNI spot.
And it's not just the loyalty, it's the second part that you mentioned is the vindictiveness. He has proven himself to be this, an operative, a Trump toady who will not only be loyal, but will use government against Trump's enemies, right? We saw what he did with the housing agencies and Letitia James, and that's why he wants him there. But also remember, this DNI position, it was created after 9/11. Some of these senators that are still there are old and were there when these laws were created, which was, I remember the first DNI officer. It was John Negroponte, an intelligence officer, somebody with impeccable credentials. So I think even for Republicans, it is galling that we would give this DNI position to somebody who is an unqualified, vindictive, Trump bootlicker.
And we've seen Trump abuse the system with making them an acting.
This really highlights a deeper issue in American politics, the tension between professional expertise and political loyalty in key government appointments. What strengthens Bakari Sellers and Ana Navarro's argument is that the Director of National Intelligence position was created post 9/11 specifically to prevent catastrophic intelligence failures by coordinating agencies like the CIA, FBI, and NSA. Historically, this critical role has been filled by individuals possessing extensive national security or military backgrounds, such as John Negroponte and James Clapper. That precedent matters because intelligence leadership is not merely symbolic. It directly influences how the United States evaluates global threats, shares classified assessments with international allies, and responds to unfolding crises. Bipartisan commission reports have consistently warned that political pressure can distort objective intelligence assessments and weaken essential trust between agencies and policymakers. This trust is vital not just domestically, but also for international partners like NATO and Israel, who rely heavily on accurate, uncompromised U.S. intelligence sharing. Maintaining these institutional safeguards built over decades is absolutely crucial. Oversight mechanisms exist precisely to ensure that intelligence agencies remain completely independent and highly credible across changing presidential administrations, shielding the nation's defense apparatus from shifting political winds. Ultimately, the core concern raised by Sellers and Navarro centers on systemic precedent rather than individual personalities. When political loyalty begins to outweigh verified experience in national security roles, it raises legitimate questions about operational effectiveness, long-term stability, and whether the intelligence community can remain insulated from political pressure in an increasingly polarized environment. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.